In 106 AD, Roman Emperor Trajan achieved a monumental military triumph, a victory that would define the future of the Roman Empire. The conquest of the formidable Dacians in present-day Romania not only opened the door to the expansion of the empire, but also paved the way to its ultimate zenith. The Pax Romana that followed was a period of unprecedented peace, during which the empire ruled the largest space in its history. From the Iberian Peninsula and Britannia in the west, to Mesopotamia and the Persian Gulf in the east, the reach of the empire was truly unprecedented. At this point in history, no one could have foreseen that just 3 centuries later, this mighty empire, which had seemed invincible, would crumble and stand on the brink of extinction. This is the untold story of the fall of the Roman Empire. Rome's origins stretch far back into the prehistoric period. According to lore, their legendary city was founded by the mythological twin brothers Romulus and Remus in 753 BC. The earliest foundations of a city-state appeared some 70 years later. This period marks the beginning of a complex evolutionary process in which a small village along the Tiber River became one of the most powerful empires in history. Initially, Rome rose as a kingdom, but less than a century later, it became a republic characterized by elected officials rather than hereditary rulers. In the centuries that followed, Rome earned a reputation as a powerful nation and conquered several prominent civilizations, including the Carthaginians, expanding its territory far beyond the confines of its Italian homeland. Shortly before the beginning of the 1st century AD, however, the republic fell into turmoil. Amidst the chaos of internal conflict and civil war, the infamous Julius Caesar ascended to power. But after his assassination in 44 BC, a power struggle broke out among his successors. In the end, Octavian, later known as Augustus, emerged victorious after defeating Mark Antony at the Battle of Actium 10 years later. In 27 BC, Octavian received extraordinary powers from the Senate and assumed the title Augustus, marking the official beginning of the Roman Empire. In the centuries that followed, the empire experienced considerable territorial expansion, conquering vast parts of the known world, including Greece, France, Spain, North Africa, Britain, and the Middle East. In the 2nd century, it became the largest empire that had ever existed. Soon, however, its power declined, and after a series of events, it was placed on the brink of extinction. The decline of the largest empire in the world at that time was not a sudden event, but a slow weakening of its power. Internal conflicts and weaknesses, combined with extreme pressure, began to undermine the Roman Empire's ability to impose its authority in the West. By the 4th century CE, the cracks that would eventually lead to its demise were becoming more and more apparent. Contemporary historians speak of a large confluence of problems in various branches, such as the effectiveness and numbers of the army, the health and numbers of the Roman population, the strength of the economy, the competence of the emperors, internal power struggles, religious changes, and the effectiveness of the civil administration that ultimately played the decisive role in its demise. Climatic changes and endemic and epidemic diseases were also a driver of many of these immediate factors. Perhaps, however, the biggest stick in the wheels of the cart has been economic problems. They played the most decisive role in the decline. Constant wars and excessive spending have greatly depleted imperial funds. In order to cover the growing expenditure of the treasury, despotic taxation was resorted to, which in turn led to a great inflation that widened the gap between rich and poor. The rich sometimes fled to the countryside to avoid taxes. The empire also faced labor shortages. The vibrant economy that kept the wheels of Roman society turning relied heavily on slaves, but their supply dwindled as military expansion slowed towards the 3rd century. Excessive military spending, civil wars, and tax increases began to damage industry as well. Cities increasingly lost revenue from local taxes and property donations, which began to make it difficult to maintain public services and infrastructure. As you can see, one thing led to another, and so slowly but noticeably, degradation began throughout the empire. One of the reasons is also the huge size of the empire. At its peak, it covered about 5 million square kilometers. This presented an administrative and logistical challenge. Even with sophisticated road systems, communication was slow, making it difficult to administer the dominions and protect the borders from rebellions and raids. The diversion of funds for military maintenance slowed technological advances and led to the destruction of civilian infrastructure. Environmental factors, including climate change and disease, also contribute. The favorable climate that Rome enjoyed in its Mediterranean lands from around 200 BC to AD 150 was followed by a deterioration. Pandemics, such as the Antonine Plague and the Cyprian Plague, caused huge demographic changes, economic crises and food shortages, and the high death toll from the Antonine Plague worsened the empire's attempts to repel the invaders. Political instability and division began to corrode the empire from within. At the end of the 3rd century, Emperor Diocletian divided the empire into two, Western and Eastern, to make it more manageable. While the move initially had an effect, the division eventually led to the estrangement of the two halves. Over time, they failed to cooperate as one cohesive empire and even refused to help each other. The predominantly Greek-speaking Eastern Empire grew richer, while the Latin-speaking Western Empire faced an economic crisis. The power of the East also redirected barbarian invasions westward, making Italy and Rome more vulnerable. Problems continue to mount, and ineffective and inconsistent leadership exacerbates them. The emperor's position became increasingly dangerous, and corruption grew. Many of the emperors who occupied the throne in the 2nd and 3rd centuries ascended to it through violence. But in spite of their ruthlessness and cruelty, they were not safe either. The Praetorian Guard, whose role was to protect the emperor, often killed and installed new emperors of their own choosing. This same corruption and incompetence affected the Roman Senate. While Roman society continued to collapse internally, the empire also had to deal with external threats. Rome had long interacted with Germanic tribes, but by AD 300, groups like the Goths were encroaching beyond the empire's borders. In 376, a great migration of Goths and other non-Roman peoples fleeing the Huns entered the empire. Roman forces, however, failed to control them effectively. Nevertheless, the imperial army was successful in stopping a German revolt in the late 4th century. But little did they know that the empire would soon be brought to its knees. In the 5th century, everything changed. Around 410, the Visigothic king Alaric defeated Rome. But how and why did this fatal event come about? Because the Visigoths, who had previously been allies of the Roman Empire, rebelled and demanded compensation for their services after the death of Theodosius I. When Emperor Honorius refused to grant their demands, Alaric led his troops to Rome. They managed to enter the city through the Salarian Gate, whether through treachery or because of the city's weakened defenses remains unclear. Alaric's forces sacked Rome for 3 days, plundering the treasury and the imperial palaces before departing for Spain, where they eventually settled. This is the first time the fabled city has been sacked since the time of the Gaulish Celts, who sacked it 8 centuries earlier. Over the following decades, the empire struggled with constant threats, and the territories of the Western Roman Empire shrank considerably. In 455, the city was attacked again, this time by the Vandals. By 476, the power of the West Roman Emperor was negligible. In the same year, the German barbarian king Odoacer deposed the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire in Italy, named Romulus Augustus, and the Senate sent imperial insignia to the east to Emperor Zeno in Constantinople. This event is often pointed to as the official date of the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Despite the various aspects that led to the final decline of the Roman Empire, historians such as Edward Gibbon argue that the rise of Christianity eroded traditional Roman values, shifting the focus away from the state and increasing the political role of church leaders. However, modern scholars generally argue that the influence of Christianity was less significant than military, economic, and administrative factors. Still, it can be said that the Western Roman Empire, in a sense, survived in the face of the Catholic Church. After the fall of the empire, the church centered in Rome continued to exist and to exert considerable influence over Western Europe. The papacy, the seat of supreme authority in the Catholic Church, became a powerful political and spiritual factor in the region, and the church itself preserved aspects of Roman culture and accumulated knowledge. However, the empire of the Caesars and Augustus, which once controlled a vast territory stretching from Western Europe along the shores of the Mediterranean and into the Middle East, is coming to an end. If you found this video interesting, then don't miss our documentary account of Egypt's history packed into just 15 minutes. Click on the video to the left to continue with it.